There are NBA stars who are expected to make it from the beginning. And then there's Jimmy Butler. Because Jimmy Butler didn't grow up like a future superstar. He didn't come from a basketball factory. He wasn't the teenage phenom with cameras following him around, giant sneaker deals waiting for him, or colleges fighting over him at 15 years old. At 13, he was thrown out of his home. No stable place to live, no real safety net, no clear future. Just a kid in Tomball, Texas trying to survive one day at a time. According to Butler's recollection, the last words he remembers his mother saying before kicking him out were, "I don't like the look of you. You gotta go." His father had already been out of his life since infancy. For a while, Jimmy bounced from house to house, staying with friends wherever he could. And that's what makes the rest of this story feel almost unreal. Because somehow, that kid would fight his way from instability and rejection all the way to the NBA. Then past the NBA, into superstardom, into all-star games, all-NBA teams, an Eastern Conference Finals MVP, a trip to the finals, another trip to the finals as the leader of an 8 seed, in one of the greatest playoff scoring performances the league has ever seen. But before the legend of playoff Jimmy ever existed, Jimmy Butler was just trying to find somewhere to sleep. Jimmy didn't build his game from comfort, he built it from survival. Every setback that would later break other players had almost no effect on him, because by the time basketball started getting hard, life had already been harder. And for a while, there was nothing glamorous about his path. He wasn't treated like a future NBA player in high school. He played at Tomball High School and had a strong senior year, averaging 19.9 points and 8.7 rebounds while earning first-team All-District honors. But even with that production, he still wasn't heavily recruited. He wasn't ranked by the major scouting services, and he didn't have the AAU exposure that gets players noticed. The scholarship offers most elite prospects dream about never really came. That alone would have been enough to bury most basketball careers before they ever started. But Jimmy Butler's story, the turning point, came from something random. Not a scout, not a coach, not a national tournament, but a 3-point contest. One day after a summer league game, a young kid named Jordan Leslie walked up to Butler and challenged him to a shooting contest. That kid would become one of the most important people in Jimmy's life, because after that, the two became close friends. Jordan started inviting Jimmy over, first to hang out, then to stay the night, then again, and eventually Jordan's mother, Michelle Lambert, let Jimmy stay for good. Money was already tight in their house. They already had a full family, but they made room anyways, and that changed everything. For the first time, Jimmy had structure, rules, expectations, and a real home. Michelle Lambert gave him boundaries and stability, and Butler made it clear how much that meant. On Marquette's senior night, she was the one who walked him out onto the floor. Later, Butler said, "That's my family. That's Michelle Lambert. She is my mom." Think about that. A kid who had been discarded suddenly had people who believed in him enough to bring him in as their own. That didn't magically solve everything, but it gave him a foundation. And once Jimmy Butler had that, he started building. Still, basketball didn't suddenly open up for him. Even after a productive high school year, the Division I offers weren't there the way he hoped. So Jimmy took the path a lot of overlooked players are forced to take: junior college. He enrolled at Tyler Junior College, and that became another test. If he failed there, the dream would probably die. But instead, he exploded. In his first conference game at Tyler, he scored 34 points. He became the team's leading scorer as a freshman and earned honorable mention junior college All-American honors. That season finally pushed bigger programs to notice him. By April 2008, he had real offers from schools like Marquette, Kentucky, Clemson, Mississippi State, and Iowa State. That's the first real pattern of Jimmy Butler's career. When the door doesn't open, he keeps pounding until somebody hears it. And when he finally chose Marquette, that wasn't some flashy superstar decision. Michelle Lambert has said that academics played a major role in why she liked Marquette, because basketball was never guaranteed. Jimmy Butler wasn't walking into college as the next big thing. He was still trying to prove that he belonged. Then he got to Marquette and ran into another wall. Because at Marquette, Jimmy wasn't the man anymore. He went from being a scorer with freedom to a player fighting for minutes. As a sophomore, he averaged just 5.6 points in 19.6 minutes per game, coming off the bench behind future NBA players Wes Matthews and Lazar Hayward. And Buzz Williams coached him hard, really hard. Williams later said he was ruthless on Butler because he believed Butler had no idea how good he could be. And this is where Jimmy Butler started becoming the version of himself the NBA would eventually fear. At first, he was frustrated. He even thought about leaving. But instead of quitting, he adapted. He stopped seeing himself as a scorer and started becoming a complete player. Someone who could defend, rebound, handle the ball, play through contact, and do whatever the team needed. By his senior season, the transformation was obvious. Butler averaged 15.7 points, 6.1 rebounds, and 2.3 assists at Marquette, and scouts started to see something different in him. He wasn't playing with the ego of a star. He was playing like a player who understood the value of every possession, every matchup, every role. He could guard multiple positions, he could make winning plays, and most importantly, he looked like somebody who could survive any environment. And that's why the NBA came calling. In the 2011 NBA draft, Jimmy was selected 30th overall by the Chicago Bulls, last pick of the first round. Even at that point, with everything he had already fought through, the league still didn't view him as a future superstar. He entered the NBA the same way he entered almost every level before it: overlooked, underestimated, and expected to fit around bigger names. And early on, that's basically what he did. As a rookie in the lockout-shortened 2011-2012 season, he played just 42 games. The next year, he played all 82, but he still wasn't Jimmy Butler the star. He was Jimmy Butler the worker, the defender, the guy coaches trusted because he never stopped competing. And in 2014, he averaged a league-high 38.7 minutes per game among qualified players and earned all defensive second team. That was the beginning of the league realizing this wasn't just another role player. Then came the leap. In 2014-2015, Butler won the NBA's Most Improved Player. That season changed how he was viewed. He wasn't just a tough, useful wing anymore. He was becoming a star. The Bulls had drafted him as depth. Now he was turning into a franchise piece. And from there, the resume kept growing. All-star selections, all-NBA honors, all defensive teams, a reputation as one of the fiercest competitors in the sport, the kind of player teammates respected, opponents hated, and fans either loved or couldn't stop talking about. By the time his career moved through Chicago, Minnesota, Philadelphia, and then to Miami, Jimmy Butler had become something even more dangerous than a star. He had become a star with a chip on his shoulder. And Miami was where the myth really took off. Because when Butler joined the Heat in 2019, it felt like a perfect fit immediately. The franchise's identity matched his identity. Tough, demanding, physical, relentless. In his first season there, Miami reached the NBA Finals inside the 2020 bubble. That run gave the whole basketball world a front row seat to what happens when Jimmy Butler senses a stage big enough for his pain, his pride, and his obsession. Then came Game 3 of the Finals against the Lakers. With Miami down in the series and badly outmatched on paper, Butler produced one of the greatest Finals performances ever. 40 points, 11 rebounds, and 13 assists. It was just the third 40-point triple-double in NBA Finals history. For one night, he dragged the Heat past LeBron James and the Lakers through pure force of will. He didn't look overwhelmed by the moment. He looked like the moment belonged to him. That game didn't win him a championship, but it changed how people saw him. Jimmy Butler was no longer just a star. He was now something harder to define. Someone who seemed to get bigger when the pressure got heavier. Someone who could walk into the biggest games in the sport and look completely unbothered. And that feeling only grew in 2023. Miami entered those playoffs as an 8 seed. Usually, that's the kind of seed that gets brushed aside quickly, especially when the first round matchup is the top seed in Milwaukee Bucks. But Jimmy Butler saw that series like an opportunity. By the end of it, the basketball world had another all-time playoff performance. Game 4, 56 points against Milwaukee. And that tied the fourth highest scoring game in NBA playoff history, and it pushed Miami to a 3-1 series lead. Butler averaged 37.6 points for the series as the Heat finished the upset. An 8 seed had just taken down a 1 seed, and Jimmy Butler was the reason it felt possible from the start. That run didn't stop there. Miami kept going, and Butler led the Heat all the way back to the NBA Finals. Along the way, he was named the 2023 Eastern Conference Finals MVP after helping eliminate Boston in 7 games. That made it 2 finals appearances in 4 years. And that's the part of Jimmy Butler's story that hits the hardest. This was never supposed to happen. Not for the kid who got kicked out at 13. For the player who wasn't ranked. For the prospect who had to go to junior college. But that's exactly why the story works. Because Jimmy Butler didn't become great through a straight line. He became great by surviving version after version of being doubted, pushed aside, and forced to prove himself again. Every stage of his life trained him for the next one. Home instability trained him to endure. Junior college trained him to earn. Marquette trained him to adapt. The NBA trained him to attack weakness and pressure without fear. By the time the lights got brightest, Jimmy Butler had already lived through darker places than a playoff game could ever create. That's why he looks so calm when everybody else starts panicking. That's why the nickname Playoff Jimmy stuck, because at some point, it stopped sounding like a joke and started sounding like a warning. And maybe that's the craziest part of this entire story. Jimmy Butler didn't just reach the NBA after everything he went through. He became one of the defining competitors of his generation. A 6-time All-Star, a 5-time All-NBA selection, a 5-time All-Defensive selection, Most Improved Player winner, an Eastern Conference Finals MVP, the leader of multiple underdog playoff runs, the engine behind one of the most unforgettable finals performances ever, the author of a 56-point playoff masterpiece, a player whose entire career feels like a challenge thrown back at every person who ever told him he wasn't good enough. Jimmy Butler's career is a reminder that the players with the hardest roads sometimes leave the biggest marks. If you enjoyed the video, subscribe for more stories like this, and tell me in the comments, what NBA player should I cover next? Thanks for watching.